Okay, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you everybody who's taken a little time out of your Tuesday to spend some time with us here today. This TrenData sponsored webinar, How to Build a Retention Team to Augment Your Recruiting Efforts. As Jonathan pointed out, my name is Tom McKeown. I am the CEO and co-founder of TrenData, and I'll be doing the webinar here today. Looking across at some of the people who are on the call today, I think I've spoken with some of you in the past, and some of you have also attended our past webinars. We hope to make this one as fruitful as those have been, as obviously you're coming back to see another one. So a little agenda about what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I'll give everybody just a brief overview of who TrenData is, not to be too salesy, but just a little background on us. And then we'll jump right into the meat of the presentation. Start out with talking about why companies are so understaffed, not only today, but often. We'll talk a little bit about building a retention team to augment your recruiting team. And then once we've delineated those two functions, we'll talk about an optimal way to go about setting targets for both teams. Of course, you don't want both teams to exist in a silo. So we'll also talk about some good techniques where the two teams can collaborate with each other and with the rest of the company for the betterment of revenues and savings going forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can use technology to augment and optimize the efforts of both teams, all of HR and all of the company in general. And we'll tie this into a demonstration of the TrenData solution to actually show how you can use technology to do the above. We'd like to ask everybody to wait till the end to ask any questions. I wouldn't say ask questions, but along the way as we're doing the presentation, if you have a question, just email it to Jonathan Webster. He's the organizer, and he will accumulate them and ask them at the end in a section that we have for question and answer. So TrenData, we're broadcasting to you today from Richardson, Texas, which is a northern suburb of Dallas, about 10 to 15 minutes north of Dallas, which is where our worldwide headquarters is. We have offices throughout the United States, but also in Europe, Middle East, out of Lebanon, and also in the Philippines. We launched our company 2 years ago in 2017. We work mostly with corporate clients, or I'd say organizations. Really, anybody who has a workforce is an optimal prospect for TrenData. Our solution is AI-driven people analytics. It is a cloud SaaS offering, so pretty much all you need is a browser to be able to access it. There's no IT implementation or everything's done in the cloud. Here's just a quick look at some of our clients. We have across multiple industries. We just like to point this out. So if you are down the road looking at buying for TrenData, we have probably enough customers to give you several in your own industry to be able to talk to help you make a more informed decision. We don't do everything on our own, or we don't sell entirely on our own. We have a direct sales offering, but we also do work with several very high caliber partners in both them augmenting our solution and providing as a vehicle to resell our solution. Here are some of them listed here: ADP, Deltek, some you've probably heard before, but also some really neat niche vendors. Talent Guard is a talent management vendor. Impact Workforce Technology works in the recruiting and vendor selection space. And Engage Recruiting will actually show they are actually a module we offer within our solution. And then, of course, our Predictive HR does a lot of our implementations. Okay, so why are companies so understaffed? Well, it's pretty easy to see why they're understaffed today. It's actually a very tight labor market. The recent unemployment figures that came out last month from the Bureau of Labor Statistics had unemployment at a 20-year low at 3.7%, meaning there's not a lot of people out there to go out and get jobs from. And if you look at that in a more specific sense, the BLS showed that there are actually 7.6 million jobs in the US that are open, and there are only 6.5 million candidates searching for jobs. So even if everybody there found a job, there'd be 1.1 million unfilled jobs at full employment. What's really frustrating for companies is really the most qualified candidates, the one you want to get, are generally employed and happy where they are. It says 86% of the most qualified candidates are not looking and employed somewhere else, according to CareerBuilder. And corporate turnover, as the economy has gotten to get better, has climbed up to near 20% in 2018. Not only you have a tough time to find people, but holding on to your people has been a real challenge as well. All symptoms of a very healthy and tight economy. But beyond that, it's a historical miscalculation that companies, it really is why they're understaffed. Mostly because companies are very good at setting recruiting goals. They want to grow their business X amount. They decide how many people they're going to go out and forecast to hire, and it's pretty much locked in and loaded at the beginning of the year, and those targets are moved or addressed throughout the year. Rarely, and you would think this is pretty obvious, but rarely do companies take into consideration the people who are going to be leaving during the year. As I just talked about, 15 to 19% turnover in the industry. You can see how there's just a natural born deficit if you only go off of how many people you want to grow the company by. And very few companies, if any, have any targeting towards retaining employees. There's a big initiative in the industries today to engage employees as an effort to find out, who's at risk and find out ways to actually keep them employed. But again, it tends to be more of an initiative, unlike recruiting, where it's a hard target. Nobody really owns retention. It's more of a general goal set out to HR without any specifics behind it. So if you look at the way a recruiting team would be set up in most companies, it's generally under human resources. You'd have a recruiting department, and depending on the size of the company, it's generally run by a director or a vice president who actually has an assigned budget that is recognized every year. And within that team and using that budget, there are individuals, staffers in various positions that go out and try and recruit people into the company. They have targets, X number of people that they have to recruit and bring into the company. And they have incentive compensation, much like a salesperson. If they bring in X number of their quota of employees into the company, they get paid bonuses or commissions or different ways of it's being structured. Now, when you look at the retention side, this is kind of fictional over to the right. Very few companies have a retention department. But if you could assign those same type of people or organization to a retention department, where you have a leader, regardless what the title is, that has budget to go out and retain employees, you could set up a team that would be similarly compensated and driven within the organization. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, if you look at recruiting, I say conventional wisdom because I haven't been able to find a statistic to tie to this, but I've been hiring and running corporations for almost 20 years now. And generally the thought within companies is it takes 3 to 6 months to recruit a good candidate, just to get them through all the process, find them, get them through all the processes, hire them, and then often another 6 months to ramp them up to where they're more than break even productive. There was a study actually done by Training Quarterly, popular periodical in HR spaces, which actually documents that it's more like 1 to 2 years before an employee is actually on board and fully productive. To make matters even more complicated, another survey by CareerBuilder said that 33% of people who join companies leave before 6 months are up. So you're losing about a third of your people that you've already recruited and brought in the door. So all of that together, and the idea that even once you get someone on board and up to speed, how good are they going to be? You compare that with one of your high-performing employees, who most studies show produce 3 to 4x more than their peers in the organization, and generally bring up the quality of the organization just by their sheer work, drive, and effect on others. So would you rather go out and recruit somebody like on the top level, or keep somebody back on the lower level there? You know, it's a no-brainer. You definitely want to keep this high performer in place and not have to go out and crapshoot and recruit someone to come in and replace them. So being that that's the choice, retention should be a major goal within your organization. Now, if you look at how you would go about putting a team together and targeting them, take just a general scenario here. So suppose we've got a company that has about 2,000 employees, and they're looking to grow their business 20%. Generally, that would maybe not one-to-one equate, but pretty close equate to that they're going to add 20% more employees to reach those numbers. So if you're a 2,000 person company and you want to be at 2,400 employees next year, you've got to add 400 employees. So is that the target that you give your recruiting department? It shouldn't be, too often is, but when you factor in turnover, even if you're at the low end of the spectrum and turnover your organization is about 15%, that means you're going to lose 300 people, which will make your net employee addition to that 2,400 actually 700. Now, what can we do as far as identifying who should we keep, target as people we want to keep? Well, a lot of statistics, and I don't have anything exact, but I'll show you a slide on the next page that kind of backs this up. What we call regret turnover, which is a common phrase in the industry. It's basically a voluntary turnover of a high performer. So it's somebody who leaves the company that you don't want leaving. And that generally tends to be half or even close to more than half of your departures at any particular time, depending on whether it's a booming economy or a not so booming economy. But so if you just take the figure of 50%, being your regret turnover, that's 150 people that are probably going to leave the organization that you don't want to leave. Now, kind of backing that up, sorry, this graphic's just a little blurry, but this was a chart put together by Compensation Force a couple of years ago. It looks like it stopped in 2017. But the thing that you kind of get out of this figure is that it's really voluntary turnover, which ebbs and flows. So when the economy is good, like it was in 2008, and which it got back to right now in 2016 through 2019, voluntary turnover tends to be very high and tends to go down during recessionary times, like during the 2009 to 2011, because there aren't as many opportunities out there. But if you notice the delta between the blue and the red lines, you see that's involuntary turnover. That remains relatively consistent. Anywhere from 5 to 6% in the industry, which means companies are going to push out bad employees regardless of whether the times are good or bad, but it's the people they want to keep, particularly in good times, that they got to make the effort on. So if I go back to my graph, my scenario here, if we look at how many people that we're going to want to target to keep out of the amount of attrition, and it'd be 150. So you subtract that from the 700, and what you should really be setting your targets at for recruiting is 550, and your retention target should be 150. Okay, so rather than 400, you go and do what you would normally do with your recruiting teams and giving them the quotas to hire 550 people. But what do you do with the retention team once you put it in place? How do you compensate and build them? Well, probably a good way to do it is to assign a number of high performers to all of your people in your organization. So you might start out and build that team if you have 150 people, maybe build 5 retention experts, and target them each to 30 high performers to keep them in the company. Now, not everybody is going to leave, so maybe you look at setting a minimum threshold. If you can't keep 20 of those per team, then probably you have the wrong person. But maybe put a minimum of 20, and then every 1 over 20 that the retention specialist is able to hold on to, you give some sort of an incremental part of a bonus. You could do it just equally, so every one is 10%, or you might stair it, make the first one 5 and move it up to 20 per as you get up the ladder. If you do the optimum job and keep all of your high performers in a year, then I think you'll have a really leg up on your competitors in the industry, because nobody's been able to do that. So you go back to that. So now you've been able to build out and target and comp a retention department to augment your recruiting department. As I said earlier, you don't really want these to exist in a silo where none of them are, they just get their own targets, they go off and do their own things, which tends to happen with sales teams, but you don't want this to happen with your various teams. You want them to work together, because really it's 2 teams, but it's the one goal. The one goal is to grow the organization by that 400 employees. But also keep the people you want to keep. So you definitely want to have collaboration between these 2 teams. Maybe it's the leaders, maybe it's representatives of each team meeting weekly to kind of collaborate on things like, a retention person could be able to share very much more actively, what are the wants and skills of both a happy and productive employee. They're able to observe who's successful. They're able to observe what these people like about the company. And you pass that on to the recruiters, and they can look for those types of people and emphasize what the company does that people like. Because it's not always known why people leave. You do exit surveys, and like any survey, people do it in haste just to do it to be nice. But usually when people leave, you don't know why they left to a large extent. So if you're along the way working with them from a retention capability, you'll learn more about what they don't like at the company and can address it before it becomes a problem. And specifically, you want to be able to inform the C-suite, the business unit leaders, and the other marketing people in the company, because you notice there's a lot of stuff out on published press releases on the internet about companies people most like to work for. That's of course one thing that companies do to attract better employees, but it also improves their marketing brand. Because in a study that Accenture did about 6 months ago, it pointed out that after price and quality, the top reason after those 2 of why people buy from a company is how well they treat their employees. People are just not interested in buying from a sweatshop. If they hear that the company is a great place to work, people love working there, and they have a good product that's affordable, they're going to choose that a lot more over the alternative. So there's a lot of value to being able to have happy, productive employees beyond their contribution to the company. So where does technology help you out in this? Well, being able to see everything, so you know where the problem is of course a big advantage, which people analytics can really do for organizations. It'll remove subjectivity to decisions. It shows you exactly what the problems are. Are we losing high performers? Are we not recruiting fast enough? So you have all the objectivity, and it's fact-based. It can force guidance because you can see how you're progressing versus goals, and also if a particular trend is going in the wrong direction, which is really what analytics is taking snapshots of metrics, trending them over time, and letting you see the pattern or the context of how and why things are happening. And also it gives the leaders the ability to justify an investment. So if you're going to build a retention team, being able to go to the CFO, the guardian of the company's money, and say, I need $500,000 to build this team, but look what it's going to produce by keeping these high performing individuals and the contribution they make to the company. So we'll talk about a little of these in the demonstration. So what I'm actually going to do right now is jump out of the presentation and go over to the TrenData solution and just show you a few quick things. First off, pretty common in HR to have multiple sources of data in your organization. Most companies have some HRIS system, PeopleSoft, Oracle, SAP, Ultimate, Workday. They might also have a talent management system, a recruiting system like iCIMS, and you might be bringing in external data from industry salary benchmarks like salary.com. You might bring in benchmark data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to see if your turnover is better or worse than the industry. And surveys are often brought in to augment a lot of this data as well. But once you've been able to bring in all the data, you want it to be able to produce information that is usable to you. So you can set up one or multiple dashboards that can kind of provide you the information you're looking for. In this scenario, I've set up one master dashboard, which has things that I like to track on a regular basis. What does my organization look like, and how is it going to forecast out into the future as pertains to generation? I know I'm not going to have continual growth in baby boomers going forward, as they're going to be retiring. Millennials and Gen Xers are really going to be the growing part of my population. So I want to make sure I'm targeting them with my recruiting efforts. But with any of these metrics, you have a number of different ways to go. So first of all, this is my main dashboard. I might have several sub dashboards that are specific to things like recruiting, finance, talent, organization, or demographics. I can go into any one of these, and at any time, if I wanted to grab, say, absenteeism and keep track of it on my main dashboard, all I have to do is just add that, and I've got a new metric that I can put on my dashboard. I can also drill down on any of these metrics if I want to see some specific breakdowns. Like I might know I have 1,188 employees, but what do they look like by department? How do they break down that way? Or do they, where are they located across the country or the world? And I can break it down that way. It's pretty simple things, but that's a functionality that you need to have. But it's really the analytics and what goes beyond that. One of the things that TrenData does also that allows you to get some quick insights is we do a lot with natural language. So rather than stepping through drill downs and menus like that, I can actually write a quick query that would show me, maybe if I wanted to find out how many employees I have with high performance scores. And I might want to target categorize those as something as perhaps high performers. So if I count all my employees that have a performance score greater than 3, I can see I have 348 of those. I might want to create a metric, a brand new metric that identifies them as high performers and catch that on my, and put that on my dashboard. So I'll just call it HP for now. And now I just simply add that, and I've created a brand new metric to my dashboard that I can either work with or just keep an eye on. But metrics are really, as I say, the snapshot in time. That tells you how things are today. What you really want to get into is the analytics. So if we go scroll down on this dashboard a little, you can see that I have a 6-month turnover graphic here, which tells me tracking high performers and non-high performers. I can look at these graphs in any of a number of ways. If I want to look at it differently and see it perhaps as a column graph, I can just quickly change that. It'll convert that graph to something else that I want to look at. And again, like the analytic, I can drill down on it and see what kind of problems or what kind of trends I'm looking at. So if I click on the analytics, it shows me that 6-month view, but I might want to lengthen it a little and see really what's happened in the last 12 months. And what I can see is a little bit of a disturbing pattern in that most of my turnover for the first 6 months of this last rolling 12 were pretty much non-high performers, meaning people I didn't necessarily regret having them leaving. But you can see starting in January, I started to have a lot more of my high performers leaving the company. That's a trend I definitely don't want to continue. So what I can do on that is see what I can do if that's going to continue in the future. So if I move into the predictive view, what I find is it is going to continue into the future, but kind of plateau, but stay at a pretty high level, one that I think that would be pretty unattractive to most companies. So this turnover tracks from 2% up to 6%, 5.9% monthly. If you figure out that across the year, 6% a year, that's about 70% turnover, which is 2/3 of your organization turning over, which is not a healthy turnover margin. So what I can do then is go into our modeling capability and see what can I do to change that. So if I click over here, I have a bunch of statistics relating to turnover, productivity, recruiting costs. But if I click on the modeling, it makes a few of these future months light up in that I can kind of change them to see how they can have an effect on the future. So one thing I can do is I can pay people more, see if that'll keep them around. Right now you can see the average salary at the company is about $143,000. If I were to increase that by say 5,000 to 148, if you keep an eye on the total turnover down here at 5.91, if I change this to 148, turnover goes down about 0.2 of 1%. So I just spent 5,000 times 1,000 employees, that's $5 million, very little return on my investment for that. So maybe that's not the best use of funds right now, so I can back that out. I can also see in this second metric that I have almost exactly 1/3 of my employees working from home, which I guess that means a pretty popular policy. Maybe I put a roof on, like a ceiling on it or something. But what would happen if I let maybe a few more, say I increase this to 45%? Now you can see that does start to bring the trend down a little quicker, down almost over 1% from its high. But is that getting to the people I wanted to get to? Remember, I was looking to see what I can do about high performers. So if I go to my filter again here and I look at them by performance, I can see it is driving turnover down with both populations, but high performers are still remaining very high. I need to get that down a lot quicker because it's still nearly 4 times what it was a year ago. So if I go down to my third changeable metric, I can see that I've got less than 7% of those high performers in any kind of professional development. So maybe that's why they're leaving. They want to grow their career and we're not doing it here. So what would happen if I took some of that money I was going to give on raises and put it in here and updated this to say 15%? See, that's what really hits the high performers. It has almost an immediate effect and then starts pushing things down at a much quicker rate. And the AI engine in TrenData will tell you that that's definitely something that is having an effect, and you need to increase that as much as you can over the next few months. Now, what you might question is, why did the model react this way? Why wouldn't people have stayed if they got more money? Well, you can actually do a further drill down of that and see, why didn't giving bigger raises help? And if you drill down here, what you'll find, the system will take you to, using the natural language, can take you to a graph which will show me that in pretty much all of our positions throughout the company, we're paying at or above the industry levels. So what you have is, the company is paying very well and people are still leaving. So no doubt most of those people would take another $5,000 in their raise, but that's not the reason that's keeping them from leaving the company. So obviously the problem lies elsewhere. So that's the scenario on the retention side. What about talking about that statistic where 1/3 of people leave the company before 6 months? Well, let's go around and drill down on another metric we have on our dashboard. So we've got here source of hire. This is telling us where we're getting our candidates that we're bringing into the company. We also have a few other stats which talk about stage in the process and how you're doing against your targets. But what's happening once people are inside the door? So we get about 37% of our candidates last month from job boards, about 20% from LinkedIn. Again, going to the analytics, has that been a consistent pattern? Appears to be so. The purple bar here being job board seems to regularly be the top source. I can even go back multiple years and see what that case is. And indeed, that holds true. I can look at it in percentage. But whatever it is, most of my candidates seem to be coming from job boards. Now, the question is, are those people coming and leaving? Are they coming and being productive employees? Well, since you have all of your HR metrics on one platform, you're able to actually cross-reference this. So if I were to go in and filter this and say, I want to see all the people we've hired over the past few years, but I want to see the ones that have done very well from a performance standpoint. So just if you're using the 5-point performance scale, now how many 4s and 5s do I have out of that population? And when I apply that, you see that the picture changes a little. So job boards in the current year still stays very high, but if you go back into the past, it looks like LinkedIn and probably employee referrals are kind of the 1-2 source there, as opposed to job boards. So this is really good insight to change your possibly redirect your efforts to pulling candidates off of LinkedIn rather than just bringing them in off of job boards. Okay. One other aspect of the system, which kind of gets to the external intelligence, is being able to look at what's going on outside the company. So for this, we use our Engage Talent module. And what this shows is a number of things across the organization, where you're getting candidates from, where are the best pools of information, best pools of candidates throughout the company, and to look at just kind of a specific little example of that. Suppose I were a bank and I were looking for a financial analyst. I could just type in that particular position and start off. The system's going to tell me where the highest concentrations of those candidates are. Looks like the best concentration is in California, but predictably, they're in the largest populated states: New York, California, Texas, and Florida. If I were looking just in California, to move this forward, I could just click on California, and it would zero down to the 2 areas that are most popular for those candidates there. I can trim my search a little more if I wanted to bring in a financial analyst who is a manager, maybe an executive, a VP. I could notate that. If I wanted someone from a specific industry, suppose I wanted someone from financial services or banking, I can connect there as well as if I've had particularly good success poaching from another employer, I can select which employer I want to go after. But the most key part of the solution is, if you look up at the top, there is this bar that has red, gold, blue, and green. This is based on the AI intelligence of the system as to which candidates would be most open to an overture from another company looking to hire them. So if I click just on that green, what it's going to do is give me all of the candidates who would be open in those areas. And again, if I want to get more specific and just look at Los Angeles, I can do that. I can quickly look and see how much I'm going to have to pay someone in that particular geography. Looks like the median salary is about $102,000, high end about $161,000. But then finally, if I want to go out and then do my recruiting or give this list off to my team, I can actually produce the list, and it'll give me all of these green candidates who would be, based on our intelligence, would be open to an approach for a new job. And I can click on, there's all the methods that are available to contact them by. They do have email address that was able to be pulled off of the web, whether it's phone numbers, LinkedIn profiles. And then you can also drill down on the candidate to see what they might be looking for in a new company. This particular candidate would like somewhere where there's business stability and growth opportunities. Maybe they're a little more independent, necessarily need strong leadership. With all those put together, you would also get a little tip list of how you would talk to that person on the phone. hey, are you looking for a job where you can really work hard and become a manager in 2 years or something like that? So a lot of good information here within the talent module. So if I go back just to the dashboard, we've pretty much hit on the high points here of the solution. So you can pretty much move about, grab whatever you're looking for, build out your dashboard, and still have plenty of subsequent data to go for if you need to go back on that. So this is the type of information that'll help you stick to your attain your recruiting goals, your retention goals, and also see what's it gonna take to factor in both to hit the targets that your company is looking for. So with that, I am going to jump back to the presentation, and it looks like we had a few questions come in. So I am going to ask Jonathan to unmute and see what people are interested in.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so the first question I have here is what kind of experience would you suggest aligns best with retention team candidates?
Yeah, that's actually one of the best questions, because often HR tends to draw their position people from people who have been in HR. Actually, I've found the best candidates for retention are people who've actually managed teams, both in but also outside of HR. So best candidate would be someone who's had experience managing a team, a good sized team, but then also has that complementary HR experience to know the right processes and everything to do that. So I'd say probably someone who's managed a team outside of HR, but then also has HR credentials.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. Okay, I have some really good questions here. Okay, well, here's one. I can answer this one. Will these slides be available after the webinar? Yes, I'll be happy to send the slides. Here's one for you, Tom. Let's see, it says, I hear about bias that can appear when working with data and analytics. Do you have any tips for addressing these biases?
Yes, it's always a good question, but I've been selling HR software now for about 15 years, and it's an interesting line to tip up to. The goal vendors always strive to is give the client as much information as possible, but what is too much information, and how can the client guard against things like that, such as biases? So what's important in the system is to be able to filter and hide things. So for example, a lot of our clients, when bringing up candidates, often don't try to not show certain things like age, ethnicity, and things like that. And you can also do that with the internal systems. So as you're kind of judging and you're able to look at people more by performance. So just because you have the information doesn't mean you have to use the information. I always think about that. I think it was the first Jurassic Park movie where the scientist character referred to people being thin-intelligent. The fact that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay. Yeah, so this one says, definitely won't use this person's name as they talk about a competitor. It says, hi, we use Tableau and we're not thrilled. How does TrenData get data from clients, and is implementation less than a year? I'll let you take that, Tom.
Yeah, so Tableau's been out there for a while. I think they just got bought by Salesforce, but really what Tableau is kind of the top surface of our product. It's a visualization offering. It doesn't have the underlying intelligence. It relies on the client building out the formulas. And it's really just kind of a step above Excel. You can produce graphics and everything to show what you want, and kind of not too easy manner. You have to construct the formulas, but there's no intelligence underneath it, which actually builds out the metrics, knows the domain specifics of something like human resources, and also the artificial intelligence that can do the calculations, the predictions, and the continual, making the queries in the system smarter. So it's really that just the top layer of what a TrenData does. It's the graphical interface, but everything underneath is something that's not in Tableau, and I can understand you're probably having to build all that, so that's why it's a pain.
Absolutely. Okay. So just a couple more questions here, and we'll be done. However, if you have more questions while I'm reading these two and Tom's answering, feel free to throw them in the chat box either directly to me or to the group, to everyone. But Tom, this one says, what is your security like?
Yeah, so the security is twofold. First of all, the data, we use Amazon Web Services for our cloud capabilities. So we have all of the security that's inherent in that. So your data is very secure, very protected from all of the compliance, GDPR, SOX, and everything. The data is very secure in the cloud where we have it. From a security of people not seeing what they're not supposed to see within the application, we build in a lot of things. So it's out of the box, has hierarchical security. So generally managers can't see from their point down in the organization unless they're given special privileges. We can redesign hierarchy, so it might not be position dictated, it might be company or divisionally dictated, and also being able to hide what people shouldn't be able to see, such as maybe salary or ethnicity or things like that you might have, but may not want everybody to be able to see. So that information can be shut off from viewers seeing it. So however you want to craft it to what you want people to see, the user privileges are very easy to set up in TrenData.
Okay, good deal. Well, the last question here, before I ask it, I just want to say I did promise everyone a free people analytics needs analysis for sticking through to the end, and you've done it. Thank you so much. This has been a great webinar, really cool information, and I'm going to be happy to reach out to you. I'll do all that. There's nothing you need to do. We'll just reach out to you and get that all set up for you. But the last question here, Tom, is how about regression analyses?
So regression analysis is actually something we use a great deal in TrenData, particularly for predictive analytics. So really what a regression analysis is basically charting the trends of your historical data and forecasting it out into the future. I've actually done a whole webinar on this if you wanted to check any of our recorded webinars, which actually talks more specifically, but it's really a way of projecting on a straight or curved line into the future based on what's been happening in the past. So that's a portion of what we use for predictive analytics, but also we augment that with what we call employee scoring. So what we can do based on employee groupings is be able to give a retention or some kind of score to your employees that can let you know what their flight risk is based on certain factors. For example, I always use this one, but if you have a developer in San Jose, California, and a developer in Omaha, Nebraska, chances are the one in San Jose is going to be more at risk for being poached because of where that person is, all of the technology companies out there where it's not such a employer-rich pool out in Omaha. So factors like that, factors on where people are in their career, factors on whether someone's a high performer, things like that we can all put into a retention score. And then we actually use both that and regression analysis to kind of do the forecasting and allow us to identify what are the levers for doing the predictive modeling that might be more likely to have somebody stay with the company or have a group of people not have as many people leave the company as possible.
Always super clear. Thank you so much, Tom, for your time and answering all these questions. That's all I have, and I'll pass it back to you here.
Okay. Just if anybody, as Jonathan talked about, is interested in reaching out, first of all, I put my information there. That's my email address, my Twitter handle. And if you want to visit my blog at tommckeown.net, please feel free. If you want to reach out to TrenData to sign up for an INA or get maybe a more comprehensive demo or drill down of the product, we definitely encourage you to do that. That's our Twitter handle, and of course our website, TrenData.com. And if you were to go under resources and events, that's where you would find all our upcoming webinars and also all of our past webinar recordings that you can download and play at your leisure. So as I said, I saw a lot of familiar names in the audience. So hopefully you'll all be back for our next webinar next month. But until we meet again, it was a pleasure spending some time with you, and hope to speak again soon. Thank you.